here is our discussion with Sir Ian McKellen about his life, his career and his activism for gay rights. Sir Ian McKellen, welcome to the programme.
Thank you.
So we're sitting in the bar of the Duke of York's Theatre. This is a very special theatre to you.
It is. It's right in the centre of London, and it's where I made my first professional performance as an actor. So, 1964, I remember it with an enormous affection. Others remember it because it's the first theatre that ever produced Peter Pan on stage. And then for actors, it's precious, particularly this room where we are now, the bar. This is where our union, Equity, was founded in 1930.
And in fact, we're going to have a look. There's a plaque on the wall there.
Yes, this is a copy. I've got one of my own at home.
When we got up to look at this historic declaration, we saw the signatures of all the greatest names to have trod the boards.
It's basically saying we have the right to say we'll only work with other union people. That today would be illegal. You could not say that anymore.
Really?
No. That's how they're trying to break our union.
Equity is still going strong, but what about McKellen's commitment to the Bard? So I've waited a few minutes to get to the bombshell that this is going to be your last Shakespeare.
Is it?
That's what you said.
So I'm supposed to have said, but I don't know really. You know,
so it may not be.
If you spend a lot of your life doing Shakespeare and you enjoy it and are successful at it, certain parts occur to you. And most of the parts that I would like to have played, I have done. I've missed a few, but and all at my age that are left, really, are the really old men, King Lear, who's over 80.
What is it about Lear that is so compelling, as you say, for somebody maybe of your own age, but nonetheless so compelling? And the critics have written, if you did in fact say this was going to be your last Shakespeare, that it stands to reason that this particular play would be the last one you chose.
Well, there was a great actor in my youth, Ralph Richardson, film star and stage star, who said in his typical wry, witty way, you get out of bed, it's a beautiful day, the birds are tweeting, the sun's in the sky, your wife's being nice to you, nothing could go wrong, and then, oh, you find you've got your foot caught in a Lear. And I sometimes think, how did that happen? Well, it happened because people expect you to do it, and you expect it of yourself, in a sense, and that's why I came to play it for the Royal Shakespeare Company 10 years ago. And we've made the Duke of York's even smaller than it actually is. We've taken out the last 10 rows of the seats downstairs, so everyone is close. And why should they be close? So they can hear the words exactly, and they can see. There's a wonderful moment at the end of the play when Lear is running out of life, and his breath is going. And he says to another character, quite quietly, pray you, undo this button. Thank you, sir. And then he dies, really. Almost the last word he says is button. You know, in this great, great tragedy, it's something as ordinary as a button. And I'm convinced that in the theatres that Shakespeare's plays were originally performed, everybody could see the button. Do you know what I mean? And if you can see the button, as you can in the Duke of York, you can also see the eyes.
You're obviously really in touch with the audience and really in touch with learning new things about the plays and being heard. And once you said, this was about performing in the main hall of Bolton School, oh, yes. Where you went?
Yes.
This required experimenting with being audible above the constant squeal of 800 bottoms shifting on 800 rush-bottom chairs.
That's right.
Frank Green, I don't know who he is, was right. If you can't be heard, you can't act on stage.
Yes, that's true. Yes, well, he was the man who directed our plays each year, and we did them in this rather large hall.
And how old were you then?
I'd be 14, 15, 16, 17, and I played some Shakespeare there and other plays too. Yes, well, audibility, it's obvious, isn't it? And these days, oh, I don't want to be an old man complaining, but on Broadway, for example, in New York, and even in London, even at the National Theatre, Centre of Excellence of British Theatre, microphones are employed so that the actors can be heard, or so that the actors can act in an intimate way in a large space. Well, I'd rather be in a small space, in an intimate space where no shouting is required and where you can speak as we're speaking now.
The play is also, basically, just about every school child who goes to a decent school will read King Lear up to O-level or something, up to
Poor
GCSEs.
things. What a dreadful thing to have to do.
Well, no, it's great.
But the plays were not meant to be read, except by the actors who had to learn the lines. No, they were meant to be heard.
Right.
Audience, audio.
But why do you think, then, because most of us have just read them, maybe we've had the opportunity to go to the theatre and see wonderful plays and great actors, but how do you account, then, for the enduring quality, the enduring attraction of Shakespeare?
Because there is so much in every scene of a Shakespeare play which is relevant to life, living, humanity. Of course, there are things that are outdated now, like kings and queens, but there are presidents who do have power, and there are tyrants, and Shakespeare's very, very interested in people who have power, and he wants to tell you what they're really like and what a dangerous thing it is to have too much power. And King Lear is such a man. He's a very foolish man. He says it of himself. He makes some silly mistakes. He's not a cruel man. I mean, he doesn't kill people, as far as we can see. But he doesn't know how to deal with his daughters. We don't hear about a Mrs. Lear. But you know, people come and see this and say, you were exactly like my granddad when he was dying. He went a bit dotty too. Or someone came along in America and said, well, it's all about Trump, isn't it? I don't get that at all. But an audience brings to it their own life, and they measure their own experience, a family experience, or of politics, whatever it happens to, whatever their interest is, and match it against the experience of the characters that they're seeing act out their story. That's the way in which you engage. And Shakespeare remains persistently modern, contemporary, and that was his genius, that he knew more about us than any other person who ever lived, whether we were a servant or a dictator, whether a man or a woman, whatever we happened to be, he knew.
Honestly, it is incredible you should say that, because everybody now is feeling in a state of heightened political anxiety. There's so much anxiety around the world. An author who's associated also with Harvard University, Stephen Greenblatt, has written a book, a piece of work called The Tyrant and His Enablers. He takes Richard III as his case study, and it's obviously a very thinly disguised attempt to make Richard III into Donald Trump. You have played Richard III, notably in the iconic film version of it. Do you see that?
No.
At all?
I don't. But I wouldn't contradict somebody else who did. They are both kings. What does connect them, I suppose, is an innate inadequacy. Richard III had a dreadful mother in that she gave birth to a child who was physically deformed, and says to his face later in life, I've always hated you. From the moment I conceived you, and from the moment you were born, I've hated you. I don't think you can say that to your baby and expect him to grow up to be a normal, loving person. He's discovered hate at a very early age. What it is in Trump's background, which makes lying so easy, I don't know. But I would make that connection, that you could delve into the back story of a president or a king and find that that was the most relevant source of truth about them. Trump has the whole world at his feet, and he contacts them through television. I mean, he's a television performer. That's the only success he's really had, is fronting a regular program, which is a mock program. You're
talking about The Apprentice?
The Apprentice. It's not real. There's nothing really at stake there. It's a television fiction.
And would you say Twitter...
And he learned from that how to get people's attention, and he's succeeded. He rivets our attention as we try to understand. And my fear is that in trying to understand, eventually we will become sympathetic and say, well, bless him, maybe he's right. And that an affection grows.
Do you think Twitter is like his theatrical stage? If I can extend a metaphor.
Well, he's so illiterate, and he displays his inadequacies every time he opens his mouth. I'm afraid. And every time he tweets...
Everybody is enslaved by this unique purveyor and user of the Twitter platform.
Well, dictators and leaders have taken advantage of the mass media ever since it was available to them, whether it was the radio, whether it was advertising, or whether it was now television and film as well. And he's the master of the television. You have to grant him that. He's realised that if you constantly feed something out, it'll be gobbled up, and his name will be talked about, and I think that's perhaps his main aim in life. It seems to me, as an outsider, that what he enjoys most in life is not power, but fame.
So I'm getting back to you as an actor, then. The Shakespeare scholar Stanley Wells sees your hallmark, sort of, you're a questing actor, always looking to experiment with the details of performance, regarding as your chief strength an ability to communicate emotional complexity and a troubled inwardness. Is he right?
Well, I think I like doing Shakespeare because it's difficult and it's complicated, and that the actor's job is to absorb those complications into himself, so that then they can be very clearly expressed to an audience who can then deal with the information they're being given. I don't know. I don't go to a shrink. I don't know how I work. Why do these wonderfully complicated characters appeal to me? I think because they're wonderfully and complicatedly written, and that I respond to words and think the words are very important. Hence, tweeting I don't much value.
So how does it go, then? Do you do it for fun, or do you equally respect the movie profession, the movie craft, as you do the onstage theatre craft? Because you have gone global and stratospheric in your renown by playing movies, by playing Gandalf, by playing, is it Magneto in X-Men?
Well, I wouldn't be the first actor to caricature our business as you do films for money, you do television for fame, but the real thing is acting in the theatre. And what's real about it is the presence of the audience, of course. And so it's a shared experience. If there's no audience, there's no play. If there's no audience, there's still the film. It just rolls on. It's dead, in a sense. The audience cannot affect the outcome. But in the theatre, yes, they can stop a performance with applause. They can make their experience audible to the actors, which we relish. I want my breath, which starts down there, to pass across the very intimate parts of one's body, out along through the airways, measurable, onto the eardrum of the audience. And there's a direct communication. That is life. That's people meeting each other. And it's not available to you if you're acting for the camera.
Okay, well, I'm going to play some clips.
Oh, are you?
Through fire and water, from the lowest dungeon to the highest peak, I fought him, the power of Morcus.
Well, you see, yes, look, I'm not saying that cinema is a waste of time, and what thrilling things that you can do in the cinema, and you can be actually there, it appears. You can be in Middle-earth. It never existed, but you can be there. Well, that is thrilling. Unachievable on stage, you would say. No, because in the theatre, the audience uses its imagination.
One of the things so many people appreciate about you, apart from your acting, is your activism. That you have been brave enough to come out as gay. On Radio 3 in 1988, you came out, and it was a question by the radio interviewer who said, did you want to see Article or Clause 28 disappear?
So you would just like to see Clause 28 disappear altogether?
Oh, yes, I certainly would, yes. I think it's offensive to anyone who's, like myself, homosexual.
And that clause was a prevention, a ban on schools, I believe. promoting or explaining and homosexuality.
Isn't it interesting? I use the word homosexual. I would never use it. Now, gay, I would say. I was learning how to be involved in politics, I suppose. Hadn't quite got the language. But I was 49. What's brave about coming out at 49? Well, I suppose at a time when much activity for gay people was illegal in the country. The expectation was that you would lose your job or the respect of others, including friends and family, if you came out. None of that happened to me. In fact, my film career took off when I came out.
But you say that in Hollywood, LGBTQ representation is very low, even though, quote, half of Hollywood is gay.
Well, I may have said that some years ago. I mean, I'm constantly reading about young actors proud to say that they're gay because they've been gay all their lives. They've known it. They've been through school and college where their sexuality has been accepted. Why should, at the outset of their career, should they start denying it? What a stupid thing to do.
But Hollywood is not necessarily known for being at the sharp edge of change. Again, this is maybe a long time ago, but you said they're not really known for their social commentary, are they? They only recently discovered there were black people in the world. Hollywood has mistreated women in every possible way throughout history, yes. And gay men don't exist.
Yes, well, there was a time when that was true, and that Hollywood was in the business of telling a fantasy about the world. Not the real world, they weren't reflecting the real world. You know, I visit schools quite a lot. I'm very lucky to do that, and I'm allowed to go in, quite contrary to that dreadful Section 28 that we got rid of. It is now against the law in British schools to discriminate on grounds of sexuality. So suddenly schools are now having to talk about what it is to be gay and understand it. And that's good because there are gay teachers, there are gay parents, there are gay children, there are gay governors, and there are gay visitors like me. And as I talk about the past, when it was illegal to make love to someone of the same gender, the jaws of the kids drop open. They cannot believe the world I'm talking about.
I want to pick up on what you said. You visit schools, you've also been to Oxford, and you've talked about all sorts of things there. My producer, Ben, who is here and who helped me with this research, was at one of your speeches, and he recalls a young man standing up. He wanted to ask you a question, and he just came out to you.
Oh, you'll make me cry, yes. Yes, he came out. He was like a revivalist. You know, Billy Graham, come forward and you'll be saved. And I suppose I'd been speaking so positively about my own experience of being an openly gay man that he felt this was the moment for him to join in. And yes, he came out and, of course, received a huge reception. But I've had an even better case. I was with a school once and saying, you know, everyone's worried about coming out because they're worried about people's reaction. I said, there are gay teachers in your school now, boys and girls, who daren't come out because they're frightened of what your reaction will be. That's why there isn't a single openly gay member of staff here, at which point a young man at the back put his hand up and said, excuse me, I'm on the staff here and I'm gay, which he'd never said before. And 1,300 kids looked round and applauded him. That was his coming out experience. Total acceptance.
You're the first openly gay man to be knighted by the Queen. Second, I'm sorry.
The first was Angus Wilson, the novelist.
But maybe you were the first openly gay famous person.
Well, that was a sign of the times that my career as an actor, which was thought to be worthy of a knighthood, could not be impeded by the fact that I'd said I was gay. I'll tell you a story. It's rather long, so you won't be able to include it. But I was playing Richard III in Paris, having breakfast, croissant, coffee in my single bed, watching a screen which had 10 Downing Street on it, because this was the day that Mrs. Thatcher was finally resigning as Prime Minister, and we were waiting for her to emerge. And the phone rang, and they said, this is Downing Street. I said, yes, isn't it fun? Why don't you come down, assuming it was a member of the company, why don't you come down and we'll have our croissant together? He said, no, this is Downing Street. Oh. I'm sorry. Yes, the Prime Minister's been trying to get hold of you because she wants to know if you would accept a knighthood from the Queen. I said, oh, yes. All right, I'll think about it. And I put the phone down. And as I did that, the door of Downing Street opened, and out came Mrs. Thatcher, famously crying.
years ago.
And I thought, my God, she's been waiting behind that door to know whether I'm going to accept a knighthood before actually resigning from being Prime Minister. So the very, very last thing she did was to give me a knighthood. And of course, she was a supporter of Section 28. But that was an indication to me that the world actually was changing.
That is incredible.
And she could not control it.
But what about those backlash wins? Are you concerned that the very socially conservative Supreme Court justice just nominated by President Trump, Justice Kavanaugh, could do things like reverse Roe versus Wade, but also gay marriage?
Yes, well, that's the system you have, isn't it? I'm much more frightened of the words and beliefs of your vice president with regard to people like me. I gather he thinks I should go somewhere and be cured. I believe he can't trust himself to be in a room with a woman on his own. That's a disturbed person who should not be in any control of situations. I think perhaps judges are a little bit more temperate than that, are they? I don't know. But yes, it is, of course, worrying. But then that's just the system that you have. And it must make you aware when you put your cross what you're voting for.
But what about the idea that some of these gains are not necessarily... Yeah.
Well, some people say to me, Ian, why do you go on and on and on about it? Well, I said, because I get asked about it. But the other reason is that if you don't go on about it, if you take your freedoms for granted, they won't necessarily be with you forevermore. So, yes, but you know, the gay rights movement began, for me, in San Francisco, right,
Harvey Milk?
Harvey Milk and Armistead Maupin, the author, who was my godfather and talked to me about coming out long ago when I was on tour there. So, you know, the United States is a very large place, and there are centres of excellence, and there are centres where...
And Stonewall, which is New York, obviously, and it's the name of the activist organisation that you co-founded.
Yes.
As you've just opened King Lear here in London, in the theatre where you did your first ever performance, what do you feel all these years later?
I suppose two things. One is that I'm much, much better at the job than I used to be. The only advantage of seeing yourself on screen years later is to say, well, I was no good, but if I did it again now, I'd be better. And that is partly the aim, and the inevitable aim for me of doing 100 Lears in a row, is that the 100th is going to be more insightful than the first, you know. I learned night by night by night. It used to be doing a matinee of 8 shows a week. I would peep through the curtain to look at the orders just to remind myself why we were there. We're doing it for these people who've never seen the play before. They need to hear it afresh. The fact that I've done it a score of times is irrelevant. I must make it fresh. It must be live. And usually my eye would chance on a kid of 14 or 15. Why were they there? Who brought them? Did they come on their own, as I used to do when I was there? It is for them I do it. For the alert 14-year-old. And I was rewarded the other night coming out to the Duke of York's Theatre, and there was such a little boy. I think he brought his parents. I think he wanted to see Gandalf. But he saw King Lear.
They're not that different.
Well, they're both old. So, you know, of course, it's a thrill to play to old people like myself, people who've seen many King Lears, and feel they still haven't got it, they still want more. But then to capture the mind and the heart and affect the life of a young person, and that they discover live theatre early on, I think that's what gives me the most excitement.
Well, and you give that excitement back.
Thank you.
Sir Ian McKellen, thank you so much for being here.
Bye-bye.